Promise in JavaScript can be confusing, and especially if you're just starting to learn JavaScript, then you might find it difficult. You might have watched a lot of videos but still confused. So in this video, I have tried something different by using a real life example that might help you relate with the code that you're writing so that you have a better understanding. Next time, if you forget about promise in JavaScript, then just try to remember the example that I will give today, and hopefully it will come back to you. So what is promise? A promise in JavaScript is something similar to promise in a real life. What happens when you promise someone? You either fulfill the promise or not fulfill. For example, you invite a friend at your home and ask them to bring your money back that you lent them. Now, they promise that they will come, but they haven't given you a specific time when they will come. At this stage, the promise is pending, which means that you are still not sure if they are coming or not. Now, what are the possible outcomes? Either they will come or they will not come. So these are the only two possible outcomes. Now, let's assume if they come, they will bring the money. I doubt. But if they don't come, then they will message you or call you. So this is something similar that takes place in JavaScript as well. So over here in script.js file, I have created a new promise. So this is how you create a promise. So I have a constant and given my promise name as my promise, and you use a constructor to create a new promise, and that promise will take in a function, and that function will have two parameters, which is resolve and reject parameter. If we have a look over here, we have status as false. So this false status, this is basically the status of a friend, which in this case false means not coming and true means that the friend is coming. Now we make a check using if statement. So if status is true, then we resolve the promise and we log out that they are coming. And if the status is false, then we reject the promise and log out as they are not coming. Now, how do we handle this promise? So we handle this promise by using .then, which is effective way of handling a promise. So what this .then will do is, if the promise is resolved, then the promise will go to .then, and then this will take in a function, and this function basically we are using a arrow function over here. So this answer is basically the log that we have currently over here, and that answer we are console logging the answer, and this .catch block will catch the error. So that will basically take in the reject, whatever the value is inside reject, we are catching this inside the catch, and this error is being console logged out as well. Now we save this and run this code. Over here on the right hand side, you can see that it is logged out as they are not coming. Why is it showing as they are not coming? Because we have the status as false. Now if we change the status to true and save it, now here you can see that the log is saying that they are coming. So this is how you handle a promise using .then. There's another way of handling a promise, which is by using async await and try and catch block. So let's go and comment this out and uncomment this. So here what we have done is we have a function which is basically saying learning promise. That's what we're doing now, and this function basically returns my promise, same as here how we created a promise. So over here as well we have a same way of creating a promise, my promise, and it takes into parameters resolve and reject and the same status as above, and if else statement, and at the end it is returning a promise. Now we have a sync function down here, which is basically get status. The status will be either they're coming or they're not coming, right? And we have a try and catch block over here, and what this try block has is your resolve status, and this catch block will have your reject status. So in this try block, what we are doing is we're getting the returned value from the promise, which is this learning promise will return a value, and that value depends on your status over here. So if the status is false, we get the reject value. Now this reject value will be going straight away into our catch block, because that catch over here is here to take the rejected promise. If the status is true, then it will await for the promise to be successful, and then it will log the status. So under this try block, what happens is it will wait for the promise to be successful, and if it's not successful, then it will go to the catch block straight away. And at the end, what we do is we just call get status function, and here you can see that it's logging out as they are not coming because we have status as false. Now if we change this status to true, and here you can see that this log has changed to that they are coming. So this is another way of handling a promise. These two ways of handling a promise is exactly doing the same thing, but using .then method is quite easy, and it uses less lines of code rather than try and catch block, because here we are wrapping this promise inside a function, and then we're calling this function inside get status function, and then we're calling that function, and we're using try and catch. So this is a little bit lengthy process, but you can use any of these, but using .then is easier way of handling a promise. Now that we have a little bit of understanding with promises in JavaScript, let's comment that out, and let's jump into a little bit complex problem or complex promise handling, which is fetching data from the API and checking if we actually got the response from the API and logging the response. So like above, we will be using try and catch over here. So this fetch user data function is returning a new promise. So instead of assigning a promise and returning that promise, over here what we are doing is we are returning that promise straight away, so that we don't have to assign a variable. So we are returning a promise which is pretty much similar, which has two parameters as resolve and reject. Now what we're doing is we are fetching data from this API. So this is a dummy API. So this one will have user information. So if I copy that and paste it and hit enter, here you can see this is a dummy API that we have information about some user. So we'll close that for now, and we are looking for, if you aren't familiar with this fetch in JavaScript, then I highly recommend you first understand how to use this fetch. But for this tutorial, I assume that you have somewhat understanding of fetch. So what we're doing is we're fetching this API, and once we're fetching this API, what we will do is we will check for response. Now if the response is not okay, so we don't get a okay response from the server, we throw error with network response was not okay, and then it will terminate this then statement and go back to the nearest catch block, right? So if the response is not okay, but in this case or in this example the response is okay, so it will return our response in a JSON file. And what we will do, it will not jump to catch because it did pass or it didn't throw any error, so it will go to .then, which will then have a function. This data is basically the response.json, and then this data is being resolved. So we're sending this data that we received from this fetch API in this resolve, and we're sending the whole data over here. And in the catch block, like I said earlier, if it throws an error, it goes to the catch block, and then it sends the error, whatever error that we receive, to this reject. Now like above, we are creating a new function over here, which is the fetch data function, which is a synchronous function, and this function will have a try and a catch block, and try block will have your resolve and catch block will have your reject. Now here what's happening is we are awaiting for fetch user data, which is this function. So we are awaiting for a response from this function, and we're console.logging out the user data which we passed to this resolve over here. And if we have any error, we do this, we get that error in the catch block, and then we log that error out. And at the end what we do is we call that fetch data function. Now over here in console, you can see that we have actually got the user data, which is like this. So we can actually check if we got the correct data from the server. just by checking. We have ID and all these information. We have name, username, email address. So let's go and check in over here. So we have ID and the names matching, the usernames matching, emails matching. So basically it got all the information from this API and logged out in our console. Now let's go and tweak this link so that it logs an error. So instead of com.com, I'm putting a at the end and saving. Now what we are getting in console is 2 errors. So since the response is not okay, it will throw an error and it will go straight away into our catch block, and this catch block will then be fetched in this fetch data. And since the fetch data function will try to await for fetch user data, which it will look for is the resolve, but it can't get the resolve, so it will go to the catch block and log this error out, which in this case is being logged over here as an error. Now let's go and change this to original URL, and you can see that the code is working fine and we're getting this user data in our console. So this is pretty much how promises work in JavaScript. There's not much things involved in promise, just has a resolve and reject parameters. At first it might feel overwhelming, but once you start writing few promises by yourself, and you can start with the easiest ones like I demonstrated up here, and you can move on to a little bit complex. Once you keep practicing, then you will start feeling comfortable. So I hope this video was helpful and you were able to understand promises and how to use promises and what promises actually do. So thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.